without further ado, let's go into studs and duds. And I think you want to give Dan Lanning a little bit of love here.
I do, Cooper. That is my number one stud for the week. I don't think we talk enough about Oregon on this show, and we have talked about Oregon a lot and this move to the Big Ten and what Dan Lanning has been able to do there. He's built a contender on the West Coast. He carried the torch from Mario Cristobal in the roster construction. Well, you look up now, you said it, Oregon firmly in the college football playoff conversation. They go into Ann Arbor. They win 38-17. They had 300 yards of offense in the first half, a 28-10 halftime lead. The Ducks have now beaten both Michigan and Ohio State, which have combined for the last 7 league titles. To me, what stands out, Cooper, when you look at this roster is they're not having to play these young guys that Dan Lanning has recruited. I think it's an excellent blend of in-house player development and then acquisitions through the transfer portal. Obviously, you've got Dylan Gabriel, the Heisman contender there, a bunch of other pieces. But really, this is a complete physical roster. And I think for Oregon fans, for people in the Big Ten, get ready because Dan Lanning isn't changing anything. They get it done on the recruiting trail. Signing day, it's a month away. We know that Oregon is going to finish strong. It's just really impressive to see what he has been able to build so far. And I'm excited to see how they finish out this season. They got Maryland at Wisconsin, Washington at home. They're going to be undefeated. And this is a team that I think can go head to head, obviously, with anyone in the country.
It's been pretty amazing to think about a team that used to be in the Pac-12. I mean, we're talking about Eugene, Oregon, hard place to get to. You can, I guess, say at times a little bit of a difficult place to recruit to as well. Now in the NIL and the transfer portal era, it seems like Dan Lanning, along with Phil Knight, everything that they're doing there, they just seem to be clicking. But in 2.5 years, you think about starting with the 2022 cycle, Drew, and you mentioned it, that transition class. Oregon has built the most complete roster in the Big Ten, and you talked about victories against Michigan and Ohio State. They look like they're in line to play in a Big Ten championship, also represent the Big Ten in a college football playoff. We're going to talk about USC here in just a few moments. It's pretty remarkable the job that Dan Lanning and his staff have done in such a short amount of time. Drew, I'm going to go to the SEC here. How about South Carolina? Huge win over Texas A&M. They were knotted at halftime, 20-20, and then South Carolina offensively, just an explosive game for Shane Beamer's crew. And how about Rocket Sanders and also Joshua Simon, the tight end? Both these guys transfers. Rocket Sanders coming over from Arkansas, Joshua Simon coming over from Western Kentucky a couple years ago. Rocket Sanders, 20 attempts on the ground, 144 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had 5 receptions for 92 yards out of the backfield. Simon, he added 4 receptions for 132 and 2 tutties as well. The Gamecocks racked up 530 yards of total offense, 244 passing yards, along with 286 on the ground. They're 5-3 on the season. And Drew, all of a sudden you look at South Carolina, tough loss against Alabama, tough loss against LSU. But if you were to make a case, and I know it's early, they got to take care of business the rest of the way. But South Carolina, outside looking in, maybe could have a case as a 3-loss team that could make the college football playoff. They're clicking right now. I don't think anybody wants to see them.
Shane Beamer's done an excellent job. I mean, he's doing it on the recruiting front. Dylan Stewart, the true freshman pass rusher, he had a huge night as well. Cooper, Rocket Sanders, Rocket Man, he is from Florida Space Coast. I don't think I've ever told you this. I actually thought he was going to be a linebacker in college, so it's been fun to see him get it done on offense. 2-way player in high school. Love that pick. Huge weekend for the Gamecocks, and they're getting it going on the recruiting trail as well. Cooper, my first dud. How about Georgia quarterback Carson Beck? 3 interceptions against Florida. Georgia gets it done, but Carson Beck, you look at him, what he has done over the past 5 games, 11 INTs, 12 turnover-worthy passes, according to the folks at Pro Football Focus. Carson Beck, his first 17 starts for the Bulldogs, he had 0 multi-interceptions games. Now, his past 2 contests, Texas and Florida, his worst career ratings as a passer, according to PFF. I am concerned if I'm a Georgia fan about what this offense is going to be able to do over the next month and into the college football playoff. Yes, they get it done against Billy Napier and the Gators, which were without their top 4 players. DJ Lagway gets hurt. Obviously, Graham Mertz is out. Have to lean on the run game. But, man, it seems like Carson Beck just is seeing some ghosts out there. And you kind of dig into the analytics. He's getting a little bit pressured more than he was last season. I think he's missing Ladd McConkey, and I think he's missing Brock Bowers. I have limited confidence in Carson Beck moving forward, and that's not a good thing for UGA.
Well, I guess that's my question, Drew, in the response here. At this rate, and you mentioned the turnovers are an issue, especially with the interceptions in consecutive games. But do you think Carson Beck is playing well enough for Georgia to go into the college football playoff and win a national championship right now?
I think it's going to come down to Georgia's defense, and they're going to have to get that running game going behind Nate Frazier, the true freshman who we saw there in Jacksonville against Florida. You know, his most exposure since really the start of this season. I do have some concerns. And Cooper, we talked about it last week on the 105. You look at Georgia's depth chart. Gunnar Stockton is the quarterback behind Carson Beck. He's only played 82 career snaps. Behind him, you got Jaden Rashada, the former blue chip recruit who was committed to Florida, went to Arizona State, started two games as a true freshman. I do have some concerns for Georgia. They're going to have to muck it up, and that's what Kirby Smart wants to do. But that offense, where are the weapons? Where are the tight ends? And Carson Beck, him turning it over, you know, I don't think this is a case of just some bad bounces. He's making some bad decisions, and that is concerning.
Yeah, potentially leaving some money on the table as well. You think about Carson Beck coming in the season, Heisman favorite, also probably the favorite to be the number one pick in the draft. Drew performances against Texas, even in Florida, in a win, a little bit troublesome for NFL evaluators. All right, Drew, my dud, Lincoln Riley, USC, and what is going on in Los Angeles, in La La Land with Lincoln Riley, and what does that marriage look like? In his last 16 games, he's 6-10, Drew. You're talking about a team right now struggling inside a Big Ten play. We talked about Oregon and the seamless transition that they've made to Big Ten conference play. I think this really kind of stems from the architect of roster building of Lincoln Riley and not having a Heisman winner and a number one draft pick in Caleb Williams. Now you go to Miller Moss, who's been bright at sometimes this season and struggled at other times. Drew, a loss to Washington, tough for them. They have Nebraska at home, and then they're on the road at UCLA, who just beat Nebraska, and then you got Notre Dame. So this is really, I would say, a struggling pattern for Lincoln Riley. You think about what he did at Oklahoma. He was 55-10, Drew. He's got a $90 million buyout. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. You also think about the recruiting chops as well. They're ranked inside the top 10. But think about these guys, man. You got Jerome Miles, Texas A&M, still recruiting hard. Hayden Lowe, they're obviously in a good spot to keep there. But what happens to Julian Lewis? Been rumored to be flirting with Indiana and both Colorado as well. And it seems more likely than not, he'll probably end up in a different uniform than USC, Drew. Just in terms of the fit and the awareness and the lack of urgency, both on and off the field for Lincoln Riley. And you hear some of the quotes after the game. He's saying, well, it's not like we're getting our rear end kicked. And I understand what he's saying, but there is a standard at USC that is not being met, that these people that support this program and the players themselves, they expect more. This is not why they're paying Lincoln Riley all that money, Drew. He's been a flat-out disappointment. There's really no other way to explain that. And for Jedd Fisch in year one to have that much roster turnover and to get that win at home says a lot more about Lincoln Riley than it does Jedd Fisch, in my opinion. And Jedd Fisch should be given a lot of credit. But this is a bad loss and a tough one to stomach if you're a Trojans fan.
Well, Coop, I got some thoughts on the Trojans. We're going to get it on the back end of the show, but I fully agree. What is next for Lincoln Riley? How does he turn it around there in Los Angeles? Hey, my next stud, how about North Carolina running back Omarion Hampton? A lot of people play fantasy football. I think this guy's going to be on your roster next season when you're doing those rookie drafts. He produced in a big way for the Tar Heels at Florida State, 35-11 win for UNC. Omarion Hampton, 172 rushing yards, 93 receiving yards, a career high 5 touchdowns on 35 touches. Omarion Hampton gives Mac Brown his first ever win over the Seminoles. Kind of love that little nugget there. And Cooper, I totally forgot, Omarion Hampton, a former member of my Freaks list back in 2022. He was number 37 on there. Omarion Hampton was deadlifting 585 pounds as an 8th grader. Also could hang clean 320 pounds, bench press 385 pounds. It's been a disappointing season there in Chapel Hill post Drake May, but Omarion Hampton is a bright spot. He's getting it done for the Tar Heels as they look for bowl eligibility.
The way to your heart via the weight room, right? That is the way to go, especially if you want to find a spot on the freaks list. All right, Drew, I'm going to go with Willie Fritz in Houston. You and I have long been fans of Willie Fritz. Obviously, he came on the podcast when he was back at Tulane, but the way that Houston and really Willie Fritz has built programs, you go back all the way to Georgia Southern to Tulane, and now what he's doing at Houston, he's 4-5 right now. People might be thinking out there, all right, this guy's got a losing record, but with the turnover that they've had, Drew, you look at the last couple of weeks as well. They beat number 17 Kansas State. They're putting it together. They're not playing the most complete ball. The week before that, they beat Utah as well. So the arrow is pointing up. And Drew, we like what they're doing on the recruiting trail as well. A couple guys inside the top 247, recruiting the state of Texas really well, still recruiting Louisiana too. I think Willie Fritz, 2 years from now, Houston's going to be a really, really big problem in the Big 12. I just love the way that this guy can put his fingerprints all over a program. He's done it time and time and time again. He has the formula to build a winner. I think he's going to do that in H-Town.
It's difficult to handicap, I think, the future of the Big 12. We knew that coming into this season. How about moving forward? I mean, who do you kind of bet on to emerge as the toast of that conference? I think you have to look at Houston and Willie Fritz because we know it's only going to get better as more of his players are on that roster. Love that one, Cooper. My next stud, how about Ohio State wide receiver Brandon Ennis? I'm going to be honest, Cooper, when he caught that touchdown pass against Penn State for the Buckeyes, I had to do a double take. I'm like, who is that Brandon Ennis there? He only played 3 offensive snaps, 2 catches, 31 yards, and a touchdown. This is the former number 35 player in the country, a kid. We went back and forth. Hey, did we make him a 5-star prospect? He was someone that was on the recruiting scene for 5 or 6 years. I can't remember how many times I wrote Brandon Ennis, top performer, Brandon Ennis, alpha dog. He did it time and time again under the lights on Friday nights. He did it on the camp circuit, 7-on-7 circuit. I thought it was a cool moment for him to step up in a big way for Ohio State. He's a guy that came in with Carnell Tate, has been overshadowed by Mr. Tate, and then obviously Jeremiah Smith. But he's there. He came up big, caught those passes from Will Howard, helped them get that huge win in Happy Valley.
Yeah, the irony is I'm getting ready to talk about another guy from the state of Florida. And you think about Brandon Ennis, South Florida Express, a 7-on-17, played his ball at American Heritage. Kind of thought that he was one of the more day one ready, collegiate ready receivers in the country. How about this guy, man? Xavier Restrepo from Miami becomes the career receiving yards leader at Miami. Drew, you think about all the names that have come through: Andre Johnson, Reggie Wayne, Santana Moss, whose record he broke. Xavier Restrepo did it in pretty exciting fashion on Saturday against Duke, and Manny Diaz, the coach that originally recruited him at Miami, 8 receptions, 146 yards, 3 touchdowns as Miami gets a 53-31 victory over Duke in the Blue Devils, man. Every time I watch Xavier Restrepo play, and it's kind of a little bit of a complementary skill set with a guy like Cam Ward, who does a phenomenal job of extending plays. But you talk about a heady receiver operating out of the slot, knowing how to create separation, and just having a good feel for getting open. That's Xavier Restrepo, and as much credit as Cam Ward gets, and it's deserved, this season is not the season that Miami's having without Restrepo.
And a fun nugget there, Restrepo would not be at Miami if it wasn't for Manny Diaz. He probably would have signed with Kentucky. Manny Diaz made sure to take Xavier Restrepo. Just funny how that has all worked out. Hey, Cooper, my last dud. How about Brent Pry in close games? Virginia Tech over the weekend gives up 35 points in the second half to Syracuse, goes on to lose in overtime. Virginia Tech was kind of a potential dark horse for a lot of people to win the ACC. They're now 1-11 in one-score games under Brent Pry. You look at Virginia Tech's recruiting classes, they finished 45th last year, currently ranked 45th this year. Just kind of wonder if pressure is mounting there for Pry and the Hokies.
I'm going to go with Arizona. 3-6 right now. You got Noah Fafita, Tedero McMillan, Takario Davis. Drew, you talked about those top 100 prospects. Drew, this is a team that's not performing. They got throttled by UCF, who was on their 4th starting quarterback. And guess what? They gave up 602 yards. They only had 261 yards of total offense. UCF has not been playing good football. This, if it is a sign of things to come for Brent Brennan, it's a little bit scary if you're an Arizona fan, especially given the amount of talent that they have on this team.